Beyond the Clouds. It was the morning of July 30, 2016, in Lockhart, Texas, a quiet town about 30 miles south of Austin. The day started like any other, but a balloon ride was about to change everything. The hot air balloon, a Kubitschek BB-85Z model, operated by Heart of Texas Hot Air Balloon Rides, prepared for takeoff at Fentress Air Park. On board were 16 people, including the pilot, Alfred Nichols, and a group of passengers eager for a scenic flight. Among them was a newlywed couple, Matt and Sunday Rowan, married just 6 months. Sunday had gifted the ride to Matt for his birthday. Shortly after liftoff, the passengers marveled at the countryside below. They were taking pictures and sending texts to friends, enjoying the serene morning. However, the weather was far from ideal. Low clouds and fog had already caused other local balloon operators to cancel flights that day. The balloon remained in the air for about 44 minutes. As it began to descend, that's when things went terribly wrong. The balloon collided with high-voltage power lines. Sparks flew, and the balloon's material immediately caught fire. Witnesses on the ground heard pops and saw the basket become consumed by flames. The basket crashed into a pasture near Maxwell, while the balloon envelope landed roughly 3/4 of a mile away. The impact and fire were immediate, and sadly, all 16 people on board, including Matt and Sunday Rowan, did not survive. Investigators later determined that the pilot's decision to launch despite unsafe weather and that his judgment was affected by medical issues and medications were the main causes of the incident. The National Transportation Safety Board (NTSB) cited these factors in their official report. In the aftermath, Heart of Texas hot air balloon rides suspended operations, and the FAA received safety recommendations to prevent such events in the future. The Lockhart crash remains the most serious hot air balloon incident in U.S. history, a stark reminder of how quickly a joyful outing can end in heartbreak. The Last Refusal. On May 27, 2018, in Chuy Province, Kyrgyzstan, 20-year-old medical student Burulay Turdalay Kazu was abducted by 29-year-old Mars Bodoshev, a man who had previously tried to kidnap her. Burulay had plans to marry another man in August 2018, but Bodoshev, obsessed with her, attempted to force her into marriage. That morning, Bodoshev, with an accomplice, intercepted Burulay and took her by car. Her father quickly reported the abduction to the police, who intercepted Bodoshev's vehicle. Burulay was taken to a police station in Chuy Province, along with Bodoshev, seemingly under protection. However, the situation took a tragic turn. While at the station on May 28, officers escorted Burulay and Bodoshev into a small room. They were made to sit on 2 chairs, while one officer began questioning them about the abduction. For about 15 minutes, the officer asked questions, taking notes and occasionally glancing at the two. Then, the officer stepped out, leaving Burulay and Bodoshev alone in the room. Seizing the opportunity, Bodoshev suddenly pulled out a knife. The assault that followed was swift and fatal. The sounds of the struggle alerted nearby staff, but the officer was not immediately aware of the severity. After the attack, Bodoshev then turned the weapon on himself. He collapsed to the floor, and the commotion brought officers rushing back into the room. Medical services were called immediately, but it was too late to save Burulay. This tragic sequence exposed a critical lapse in police procedure, as leaving the victim alone with her abductor allowed the situation to turn lethal. The police faced heavy criticism for their negligence. Over 20 officers were disciplined, suspended, or demoted for leaving Burulay alone with her abductor, an error that had fatal consequences. In December 2018, a court in Bishkek sentenced Bodoshev to 20 years in prison for the kidnapping and her murder. His accomplice, Akhmat Sayitov, received 7 years for assisting in the act. Her death sparked widespread outrage across Kyrgyzstan. Thousands of people, including students and activists, protested against bride kidnapping and demanded justice. Burulay's story became a symbol of the urgent need for awareness, legal enforcement, and protection for women against such crimes. The Uninvited. It was June 21, 2021, in Jaunpray village, located in the Amroha district of Uttar Pradesh. A family was celebrating a wedding, a joyous occasion with relatives gathered from surrounding areas. However, the event was disrupted by the arrival of 30-year-old Saurabh Kumar. He was not on the guest list, and his uninvited presence was immediately noted. In many communities, attending a significant family event like a wedding without an invitation is seen as a serious breach of etiquette. Saurabh's maternal grandfather, 65-year-old Jaipal Singh, chose to address the issue publicly. In front of the gathered relatives, he reprimanded Saurabh for his attendance. The public nature of the admonishment, in front of numerous family members, reportedly caused significant embarrassment and animosity, planting the seeds for the conflict that would follow. The following day, the dispute took a tragic turn. Saurabh returned to the village, seeking out his grandfather. He found Jaipal Singh near a water tap outside his house, and in a sudden act of violence, attacked him with an axe. The injuries Jaipal sustained were fatal, and he died at the scene. In a tragic development, 2 relatives who witnessed the event rushed forward in an attempt to intervene. Saurabh also turned on them. One of the relatives, 23-year-old Pusu Kumar, was critically injured in the process. Despite being rushed for emergency medical treatment to AIM's Rishikesh, he unfortunately did not survive his injuries. Local authorities were alerted, and Saurabh Kumar was apprehended shortly after the attacks. He was taken into custody, where he remained throughout the legal proceedings. Court records indicate that multiple requests for bail were denied by the judiciary. He was tried and found guilty under Indian Penal Code sections 302 and 307. On October 17, 2025, the local Amroha court delivered its verdict, sentencing him to life in prison along with a significant fine of Rs 85,000. 10 days to forever. It was midday on Wednesday, December 4, 2024, in the quiet town of Qaraqosh, Suchitepeca's department, about 100 kilometers west of Guatemala City. Madeline Rosalie Qaraqosh Perez, 24, and her fiancé Davilson Gesell Canimac Miranda, 29, were riding a small black motorcycle together. They were on a simple but meaningful mission, delivering wedding invitations by hand to friends and family across nearby villages, a cherished tradition in many rural Guatemalan towns. The couple rode along a narrow two-lane road near San Cayetano Farm, with clear skies and light traffic. Ahead, a freight truck moved along the same road. Without warning, a metal part from the truck's undercarriage apparently broke loose and flew backward at high speed. The part struck the motorcycle's front, causing the driver to lose control. The resulting crash threw both riders onto the pavement. Tragically, Madeline sustained fatal injuries from the impact. The scene of the accident was just a few meters from the damaged motorcycle. Davilson, who had sustained severe injuries, was conscious but in shock, and was transported to the Hospital Nacional de Mazatengo for urgent care. Nearby residents looked on as the wedding invitations the couple had been carrying were scattered across the road, a poignant reminder of a celebration that would never happen. The truck driver stopped a short distance ahead after realizing what had happened and fully cooperated with authorities. Police began an investigation into the truck's condition to determine if poor maintenance or negligence was a factor in the equipment failure. Friends and family mourned deeply. Madeline was remembered as kind, cheerful, and always helping others. The couple had been together 4 years, saving up for a modest wedding planned just 10 days later. The Goult wedding ambush. On June 22, 2025, around 4:30 a.m., the wedding celebration in the small French village of Goult was wrapping up. The bride, 27 years old, and the groom, 25 years old, had just stepped outside the village hall. Only a few guests, around 25 to 30 people, remained, chatting and preparing to leave. The couple got into their car, parked just a few meters from the exit. It was meant to be a quiet end to a long, joyful night. But as the engine started, a dark vehicle pulled up near the lot. Its headlights briefly flashed across the courtyard. From that vehicle, 4 masked men emerged. They moved fast, spreading around the couple's car. Without warning, shots rang out. Short, rapid bursts that echoed through the quiet village streets. Witnesses described the sound of powerful weapons firing across the parking area. The bride suffered fatal injuries in the incident and collapsed. The groom was hit multiple times in his upper body, but somehow managed to hit the accelerator, trying to drive away. Inside the car, a young relative was also present during the attack, sustaining injuries. The groom's sister, who had been nearby, was grazed in the shoulder. As the car lurched forward, it rammed into one of the assailants, sending him to the ground. That man did not survive, reportedly from the impact and the injuries he sustained. The remaining 3 assailants fled on foot, disappearing into the surrounding area before police arrived. Dozens of gendarmes, along with a helicopter and tactical units, soon flooded the village to track them down. 2 suspects were arrested later that morning in a nearby town. Both men in their 20s and 30s were charged for their roles in the organized attack, including the taking of a life. A 4th suspect remains at large. Investigators treated the incident as targeted, with a possible connection to the victims' past activities. For the quiet village of Goult, home to barely 1,000 people, it was a scene of pure horror. What should have been the happiest night of a young couple's life turned into a tragic attack. A wedding that ended with violence, loss, and shock that still hangs over the town. Ashes of Qaraqosh. On September 26, 2023, just before 10:45 p.m. local time, music and laughter filled Al Haytham Wedding Hall in Qaraqosh, northern Iraq. It was a night of celebration, an Assyrian Christian wedding, attended by nearly 1,000 guests. The bride and groom were slow dancing under a ceiling decorated with shimmering panels and draped fabric. Then someone lit the indoor pyrotechnics, a common but dangerous touch meant to add spectacle. In seconds, sparks shot upward, igniting the flammable ceiling decorations. The fire spread fast. The panels were made of cheap plastic composites, materials that should never have been used indoors. As flames tore through the hall, thick black smoke filled the air. Burning plastic released toxic gases, and pieces of the ceiling began to collapse. In the chaos, the power was cut, plunging the hall into total darkness. People screamed and stumbled over chairs as they desperately tried to find a way out, but the emergency doors were few and hard to reach, and panic quickly took over. In the stampede to escape, some guests were trampled, while others were trapped as the fire consumed the hall. When firefighters arrived, the scale of the disaster was clear. By the time the flames were under control, the tragedy was immense. The fire claimed the lives of 107 people, and left dozens more with severe burns. The process of identifying many of the victims was slow and difficult, often requiring the use of DNA records. The bride and groom survived, though both suffered burns. Their wedding night turned into one of Iraq's worst tragedies in recent memory. Investigators later found multiple layers of negligence, flammable materials, no proper exits, illegal fireworks, and overcrowding far beyond capacity. Worse, the hall's owners had ignored safety regulations for years. In the aftermath, Iraq declared 3 days of national mourning. Hospitals overflowed with burn victims, and the government promised reforms. The hall's owner and several staff members were arrested and charged, and in December 2024, the owner was sentenced to 10 years in prison. But for the people of Qaraqosh, a town that had already endured war and displacement, this tragedy struck deeper.